Um, so I'm in southeast Minnesota, just outside of Rochester. So I live on a multi-generation farm. That's my son there, Rudy, in the photo. He's generation eight of the Amundsen lineage, and that's where we live now, is on that farm. Um, I started on the Larsen farm. I think if we talk like small grains, this is the house that I grew up in. And like it's pretty meaningful to me that I have this picture now looking back on it because here I've spent many years working on this Oat Mafia project and working with my neighbors on starting a group that really is focused on a three crop rotation, oats, and how do we, bring this from a concept that we is something that we want to do into reality and getting it across thousands of acres. So my background, I went to Winona State and for business, I ended up working for Olmsted County Soil and Water Conservation District after being an agronomist for many years. So I work at the conservation district. I started actually working with feedlot producers, but quickly kind of found this realm of working with landowners, integrating cover crops, um, working in groundwater. So how our land use affects groundwater, particularly drinking water. Then because I'm a farmer myself, a lot of what I was working with other farmers, I was doing myself. And of course, it helps a lot. To bring my own experiences up to the farmers, right? So uh, in west of Byron, or sorry, west of Rochester, we have the Byron area farmers. It's a group of farmers that kind of like a farmer-led council. We don't have an entity. We just meet organically to talk about conservation efforts. And I would say that attending a Practical Farmers of Iowa meeting about growing oats and some things I was doing with Land Stewardship Project really helped start this concept of growing oats again. And a little more history, like oats, nothing new in our landscape. They've always been here. I know there's, statistics on how many acres of oats used to be in Iowa or Minnesota. I don't know. I don't have them. I just, it's interesting, to maybe have those numbers, but I think that the overall gist of this is that a small grains has been in this region in the past, and these farmers relied heavily on it. This is my great grandfather on my Amundsen side. This would be my dad's mother. This is his thrashing crew at my place where I live now, and I look at these folks that are long gone in the summers that they had. My great grandfather would take notes and obviously the invoices when he would thrash for other neighbors, and we still have them, right? So I still have those invoices and notes. And I think of the stories that these folks could tell if we could talk to them again. And I mean, I'd be interested in it. This is my crew now. My mom, they're next to me, the dogs, Jen, my better half, her two boys, Anthony and Michael, and my son Rudy. You can see he's taller than me now. That's all right. And this is the Amundsen farm. So the same location that last photo was taken, probably in the late 20s, early 30s. Um, so oats been on our landscape. This happens to be a pheasant study that was done in Winnebago County, Iowa. Winnebago County is west of Northwood, about 20 miles. I was able to find this location that they did the study. It's in Almond town, next to the town of Almond, just east of Almond. Can't recall the township there right offhand, but this is 1941. And you look at that map and the amount of crops that were on the landscape at that time, you know, there was idle ground, but hay ground, lots of hay ground, oats, corn, soybeans, pasture, and of course the farmstead. Some other crops are undefined, marshes or wet meadows, so untiled wetlands. And if you looked at a pie chart, it would look something like this. I think there's about just shy of 1,500 acres in that landscape, but 31% of it was corn and 28% of it was oats, so neck and neck with corn acres. If you look at soybeans, it was 2%. So I think the soybean acres at that time were 27 acres. Hay and pasture, there's 14 and 11%. So a lot of, when you look at oats, hay, pasture, the wetlands, maybe some of the other crop, they were nearly, they were, um, we looked at oats because they're good for soil loss reduction or nitrate reduction. We looked at hay for the same reasons. It's very nitrate smart crop, pasture. It was a substantially different landscape than we have now. And even in the 70s, so this was 76, we still saw a little bit of oats, a little bit of hay, and but a substantial increase in corn and soybean acres. So if we look at that, you had, I got to move my icon here, 52% of it is corn and 38% of it is soybeans already. Now, oats dropped all the way down to 4%. Hay is 3% underneath that. So even in that period of time, we lost a lot of the crop diversity. And like I said, I was able to locate that area, that study area. And if we look at this 160 acres east of the hog barns, that Iowa DNR bought that 160 acres sometime in the last, 20, 30 years. And you can see there was a conversion back to wetland and grassland. But every other farm in that study area is corn and soybeans. So if we were to look at that landscape now, the only idle ground or perennial grass there is the land that the Iowa DNR bought. If we were to look at that pie chart or that land use pie chart, nearly 60% was corn and 38 or 28% was soybeans, and the rest would be farmstead. So we lost all of our perennial uh, ground other than that set aside that the DNR has. We lost all of our oats and all of the other crops. So arguably, if this was all tillable land, it would be corn and soybeans only. It's probably nothing new, but I like to bring this forward as an example when I share it as an example for, these marker years for when nitrates became an issue in our waters. But also it's a real world example with data behind it of how we lost our crop diversity. And oats to me make a lot of sense because we're obviously used to it, right? So if we backed up into like my younger farming years when I was farming with my dad and uncle, we had oats every year. We grew them for feed. But who remembers oats, as I would call it, oats 1.0, was you would plant the oats in the spring. You wouldn't visit that field again until you harvested them then, right? And Um, we needed the feed, we needed the bedding, but it's a familiar crop. Another familiarity with oats is that a lot of the large mills are not very far away from us in perspective. So Minneapolis and Cedar Rapids and North Iowa, one in western Wisconsin, they're pretty close. So there's milling capacity close to us, right? Um, I knew early on that I wanted to do it with my friends and neighbors. Now, I mentioned that we had a group west of Rochester called the Byron Area Farmers that were already talking about conservation. And we, three of us, started talking about oats together as well, that we were going to try it together and see if we could overcome some of these potential risks. Um, it helped to attend the meeting from PFI to talk to other farmers that were ahead of me to see what they were doing in regards to varieties, seeding rates, cultural practices, agronomic um, uh, things we had to do, whether it was fungicide or what they were using for weed control. But if we had backed up to 2020, which was my first year of Oats 2.0, uh, that was where the things I was learning about before actually pulling the trigger. So you really kind of look at this timeline of my story, right? Like look at the ages of Rudy, and it can maybe place of when I was thinking about all this. And this was still in Oats 1.0. We were still swathing the oats. Here, Rudy's at a windrow picking them out and chewing on them because that's what Dad was doing at the time. But I had to look at these narratives and these narratives that still even persist today. I still hear these statements, and these are four uh, common ones. And you can't grow high test weight oats in Minnesota. Or I heard this from an Iowa senator in Washington, D.C. when I testified out there. It's well known in farming. The last time I grew oats, they were 60 bushels and 20 pounds. Or you can't compete with corn and soybeans on profitability. And where can you even sell them, right? So when I think about Oats 2.0 in 2020, I wanted to know if I could answer those questions and they were they true? Was that narrative true? Or was it something that we can manage and overcome by treating oats like a crop, right? So I didn't have a drill at that time. I used my neighbors. Um, I did 45 acres in 2018. I had tried that photo before was from 2018. I had tried a few acres and swathed them, still did it the way we used to. Um, but in 2020, then I did 45 acres, which at the time felt like a lot, right? And felt like a risk. And I was nervous, but my dad especially was. If you'd taken this photo about an hour earlier, you'd have seen him standing there on the headlands watching me make every round, right? So um, this is late June of that year, and I was starting to get hooked on this project by then because they were weed free. I'd sprayed them twice with fungicide, and you look across that field of oats, and all I saw was the heads and the grain, and this actually might work out, right? And combined them straight. And my first delivery to market, they were 39 pounds, and I really was hooked because I was really proud that I could grow this oat that was heavy. Um, I got a decent price for it at the time. Remember, corn was pretty cheap back in 2020. I yielded 95 bushels, which I thought was pretty good. My neighbors, I combined for Kevin Conley, and he was in the 120s for yield. I went, well, that's phenomenal. If that's repeatable, that's where we need to be. So in that winter, I bought my own drill and grew my acres up to 150. We picked up a few more neighboring farmers. The group grew to less than 300, probably more than 225, somewhere in there. I don't have an exact now count of those years. And and we move forward. Every acre I've ever grown on my own ground of oats has been no-tilled. And so I bought a no-till drill. I also really enjoyed how green the farms were so early. And the look of the oats, like rains oats. I grow a lot of rains. They wave in the wind. They have a bluish tint with them. And I almost feel like it's something maybe a little biblical uh, to grow small grains again on the farm. really the group got a jump start in 2022 when Oatly, the company Oatly, got on board with us, right? So they were looking to try a pilot project to source oats directly from the farmers. They have source traceable oats, which in commodity oats is very difficult, if not impossible, that you would know in a commodity oat where or who those oats were coming from. And here, Oatly wanted to source about 1,000 acres of oats. And because we were already 2 years into trying them and had the Byron Area Farmers Group and support from Practical Farmers of Iowa too, our network was starting to reach out. Land Stewardship Project was another. About this same time, uh, Olmsted County, which is the county that Byron and Rochester are in, was starting to get more interested in developing their own soil health, groundwater and soil health program, utilizing the first COVID dollars. So at the district, we were already talking to the county commissioners. Oats is a good example of how to break crop rotation, very good for nitrate reductions. We were gathering that data from these farms we were transitioning over. The network was starting to grow, I guess is my point. And our little group of 4 or 5 farmers now become 11. And we grew 1,000 acres of oats. We had contracts with Oatly, and they helped us get a grain cleaner in the area. And they really started to solidify the group. So here's our one of our field days we had out at my place, at my uncle's farm actually, where we met with the folks of Oatly, our neighboring farmers. Most of the original Oat Mafia members are in the photo, and really helped us start to pull for the same team on oats, right? Here's another photo of us out in the field with the Oatly team. And there's Rudy off to the right. This is that same field, almost the same exact place. I was still cutting oats straight. Um, I'd lock the cutter bar up on that head, take them straight, 20-foot head on a class 6 combine, so a little bit of an underside sized head. But if that doesn't make you want to start growing oats, nothing really will, right? Clean field of oats and clip along with all standing up straight, straight as an arrow. Now, what happened between 2022 and today, like we weren't able to pull off the continued work with Oatly, which is not uncommon when we work with private companies that they come in and engage with us, and then we lose our engagement through one reason or another. But I'd like to say that our group really didn't fade away because we lost a partner, right? So if you think of like change or healing or growth, you name it, we all want it to be a straight line. So we're at A, we want to get to Z, we want to get to, thousands of acres of oats on the landscape. We want that to be a straight line. It isn't. It's more like maybe a spiral, right? Or a coil where we make advancements and then we have setbacks, and we make some more advancements and we have setbacks. Um, our group continued to grow, and we started to merge with the Green Acres project. I've always said, and I continue to say this, that the Oat Mafia is independent, but obviously when projects align, we're going to align, right? This network continued to grow, whether it was Green Acres milling, but it continued to grow up in our state, like with state government. At the same time, we had EPA come to the state lawmakers and state agencies and say, you need a plan to address nitrates in southeast Minnesota. I was invited to be on the Nitrate Advisory Board. 2 other Oat Mafia members were invited to be on the Nitrate Advisory Board. We'd already gotten our $5 million Olmsted County Groundwater and Soil Health Protection Program rolling. The the path this was taking was still of growth, but we were missing our strong partnerships with millers that could buy large quantities of oats, right? So we're still searching, and the amount of work that's gone into trying to collaborate with those mills cannot be underestimated. I mean, that's the reason why we work so hard to get um, our own going, right? So that we could go back to this Oatly concept that we worked with them in 2022 on source traceable oats that has a water quality story, right? That has a community story to it. Um, I, as in my own realm, right, grew in my own farm, grew acres. I knew I was never going to leave small grains behind by this point. So I invested in equipment that I could get a lot more acres of small grains done for myself and for my neighbors. So by 2024, when this photo was taken, the group got to be in the 100 to 125 farmers in size, had 5 to 6,000 acres in size. So rather than having random acts of oats, that is, one farmer having 20,000 bushels and another maybe having 10,000 bushels, we had a group of farmers that had 5 to 600 to 700,000 bushels of oats. And it did allow us to access some of these difficult to reach markets. So we could start to work with the other markets, right? Another thing I invested in personally, so I'm talking about like the story of oats for me, the story of oats for the Oat Mafia. I'm going to trickle in some things of like what I did differently, and of course, hope that a lot of the questions could be, you can ask me agronomic questions, or you can ask me combine setting questions, etc., whatever. But I want to sprinkle in some learning events along the way for me, but also tell the oat story. Yeah, as it existed, right? So I invested in a stripper head. There's not very many around. This one came out of Arkansas. It was a rice head. It only takes off the grain and the top of the plant in some conditions. So I don't have to run that whole plant through the combine because I was starting to have to, well, in the year that I bought the stripper head, that it would be summer of 2024, I had 800 acres of oats to combine. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it cutting straight. So I needed to expedite that efficiency of harvest. So inside that head, there's a drum with stainless steel fingers that turns the opposite direction of travel and strips the top of the plant off. Um, the oats in this photo are a little lodged. The oats in this photo are very lodged. This was combining for the neighbor, and he had substantial lodging in his oats. And I, with my 28-foot head, can set that right on the ground. And you can see there looking underneath the head the stainless steel fingers in that drum when it stopped. I can set that right on the ground and get within 3 or 4 inches of the ground with the fingers. And of course, that's turning at 700 RPM. So it's able to lift that crop up in there. Here I happen to be going mostly in against the crop. I really need a photo of going, across the lodging because then I could go back and forth and pick up almost all of that crop. Now I know with the larger heads, there's a couple of 42 foots in the region now. They aren't able to set it right on the ground because remember the head doesn't flex. It'll pivot on your lateral tilt, but it won't flex, right? So at a 42 foot straight across, any unevenness in the ground, you're gonna dig in the dirt where I could avoid that. So just so that's known. But when the crop is standing, um, it actually does pretty good. You can move right along 28 feet here. This is probably about 4.5 miles an hour, what you're seeing here. And a Gleaner R62 is a mid-range class 6 combine, right? And that's Rudy driving the cart there. And then when the oats are standing good, it's not uncommon for me to go 6 to 6.5 miles an hour. So this is Rain's oats going about 6 miles an hour. Pretty short video. So you can see how I could speed up my harvest efficiency. You don't work the combine doing that. You will with lodged crop. You're going to be running more of the plant through, so it's going to slow you down a little more. Um, I think it's the right thing to do for me, a stripper head. Watch out for the wider ones with lodged. They're not as good as picking up that lodged crop. I think they felt that the Draper heads were just as good, if not better, in picking up lodged crop with the wider swath. But standing, the stripper head's going to have the advantage um, for sure. Some things on quality. When we're working as a group through the mafia, right? Or if we're working as a movement, which I'd say the mafia is kind of just as much a movement as it is a group. For Midwestern oats to move forward, we only get one chance to make a first impression. You do not get a second chance to make a first impression. So quality. Now, it's quality along all uh, the entire path of production. So that's why we work off of one agronomic platform where we select varieties that are suited best. We track what varieties we have on our farm, where they went, if they're mixed in the bin, if they're segregated. When we uh, mix our oats, that's the only like, we're putting them together to sell as a group. We don't want somebody to mess up the lot of oats, so to speak, right? Being a little transparent here. So, for example, your truck, check the truck before you load it, clean it, make sure there's not corn, soybeans, especially any gluten containing product, right? So, wheat, rye, barley, we don't want to contaminate our oats with gluten if we're selling into a gluten-free market, right? Know what you have in your grain bin before you start pulling loads out. Don't just send it if your moisture is too high, 14% or under. If you're 15, don't try to send it. The method to pulling samples from your bin, you use a probe, run a little out into a gravity box, put it back in if you have to, but know what you have in the bin for test weight too. So 36 generally is the minimum. 38 is spec or higher. Bugs. Oh, you don't assume that because the last load you pulled out didn't have any bugs in it, that the next one will. If you're storing into the next summer, they like to move in when the grain starts to warm up on the outside edge. Uh, so always watch for bugs. Buy yourself some grain sieves. Check it often. If you do have quality problems, most of them can be solved with this. So, this is a grain vac I bought with a couple of friends of mine. You don't always have to buy your own. You can split the cost. But what a grain vac will do is it can raise test weight 2 to 3 pounds. So you get your hose coming into it. That's a flexible stainless steel hose. It's got some corrugations in it because it's flexible, right? So when those oats come flying through there at Mock Jesus, it polishes them, and then they'll hit the inside of the barrel and collide them a little bit. So it starts to knock off any like tips. It starts to knock off the tips or any chaff in there. And that raises test weight. Any of the bugs that may have been in the sample are going to be released from the grain, and then the blower here on the front is going to pull them out through the grain and air separation sieves. There's a kind of like a sieve in a brant and a ram. There's a rotating screen inside there, same concept, and then exhaust them out. So you can see in the exhaust here, that's blowing out chaff, some thins and lights even. It'll pull those through, and you're raising your test weight, you're cleaning them, you're polishing them. A grain vac does wonders on on grain quality. If you still can't get it with that, there are getting to be more cleaners in the area. This happens to be a GCS. Um, this is the one I have, and you got your scalper in the back. That's basically a shaking sieve. The auger brings it up to the air chamber, where you have air blowing across the sample as it flows down through the cleaner. Each one of the handles, there's six of them, sets an individual gate where you have your reject on the far end, or the lower, I want to say outside edge of the cleaner goes through, and this looks like a screened in porch, but that's your chaff collector. And then in this setting here, I have these next two gates as reject, and then the clean coming out here on these three chutes. That would be the higher density material. Um, if I really want to do a good job cleaning, you can run it through the vat first and then run it through the cleaner. Excuse me. So here's the scalper. The bigger stuff is coming off at the scalper. You see a little bit of corn there, other chaff, and then this is the clean coming off the clean side of the cleaner, right? So when you run through the vac first, you're polishing, breaking some material loose, uh, breaking the tips off the oats, and then you run through the cleaner. You can start with a 28-pound oat and make it 36 plus using this method. Another thing on quality, which we learned last year, and we had some we had some gluten slip through when we had a delivery. The delivery came from three farmers. We knew some gluten made it into the mill, and I had to help find where this gluten came from, and we were able to find it. But a shout out to my coworkers. We had a break time, and I brought in samples of oats, and we went through everybody's samples to see if there was gluten. And there was, in one sample, we were able to find kernels of rye in the oat sample. So be very, very careful about volunteer rye or rye in your combine or grain handling equipment. Do not get that into oats that are intended for a gluten-free market. Because again, you only get one chance to make a first impression. So know what you have before it goes in the truck en route to the destination. It's importance of pre-sampling too, but also learning yourself about what it takes to have a good sample of oats. Learn it yourself. When we access these markets that have the water quality story attached to them, or the um, this source traceability, that we're farmers that are doing something different by nature, we are, but we're also have a value because we're doing something different, and that includes the cover crop following our oats. And I'm pretty strong on legumes and uh, in this case, medium red clover. Here's a little story on my medium red clover. Um, I seed about 4 pounds. Actually, we could get down. I'm going to start pushing that down on seeding rate, 4 to 4.5. And this is what that looks like. So a lot of times we say 8 pounds, or we used to, but we can actually go quite a lot lower than that. So th 2 to 4 pounds is plenty. Um, this is September 21st, I believe. So you can see how much growth you get out of that. If you're feeding cattle, it's just a no-brainer to graze on it or cut it and and feed it. This is what that medium red clover looks like at harvest back when I was cutting straight. Looks similar now. I do, when I bale behind a stripper head there, I do recut it with a disc bine. So you cut it lower. But this is what that medium red clover looks like at harvest. This is what it looks like when I'm no-tilling into it. Um, and you think, well, that above ground growth is only 6 inches there in the spring. Well, this is the below ground growth. So here we have almost 3 foot of taproot, and I'd argue that there's more than that because I wasn't very gentle with it when I pulled it off the side of the tiling trench. And that's where our nitrogen credit is coming from, is that everything that's below ground in that crown, that's the majority of our nitrogen credit, right? So how much do I credit when planting corn? I'll credit about 100 pounds total. So I'll apply to that next year's corn crop about 100 to 120, depending on the farm and depending on the consistency of that stand. Because it can happen that you get an inconsistency in stand if you're growing a taller oat variety or you had that kind of snuffed it out, I'd call it. Um, but if you had a good stand that looks like when that Polaris Ranger was parked in the field, crediting it to 80 to 100 pounds is seems to be the sweet spot. I've been working on it for years, but also University of Minnesota is starting to work on refining that number. So th in this example, this will be a burn down after planting. I do burn down some clovers in the fall to take the pressure off the spring because I'm doing most of this work alone. And I need to hedge my risk and how much clover is actually still alive in the spring because killing it with verdict, a full rate of verdict, only works till about the point that it's 8 to 10 inches tall. Beyond that, it gets really difficult to kill it in the spring and it'll really get you on a dry year. So I need to hedge against that. Um, and I'll kill more in the fall. I'll use a dicamba or a 2,4-D in the fall with a full rate of verdict in the spring, and I'll heat that up by spraying it with 32%. That's what it looks like after burn down. Believe it or not, that's a cornfield already planted, and the corn is spiking the day that we were out there. When we're no-tilling into that residue, that's we really need to be aware that we're getting punched through that. So our seed is in the ground like what you see here, and that it's closed up with like what you see here. You're not leaving that furrow open. You need to follow the rules of no-till, which is you're not hairpinning, you're getting it down 2 inches, inch and three quarter or more, and then you're absolutely closing that seed furrow. In some cases, when it gets cold, you will keep that soil cooler because of the amount of residue that we can grow on our oat fields. So I am removing more residue from the top of the row than I used to with my new, it's not new, my new corn planter, my 16 row. I want it looking more like this. So here I don't have as much of a clover residue, but you can see my stripped straw now. I have a lot more straw in the field than I used to. And if you're leaving too much over the row or patchy, like sometimes you have some over the row, sometimes you don't, it can lead to some uneven emergence. But you can see here that I am not moving soil. You do not want a furrow, but you want to remove enough residue, in my opinion. Be careful in the hills that it doesn't give you a place for the water to run down. So it's a little bit of a sweet spot, right? Leaving a little bit of residue on the row is okay. Consistency is key. and don't and I've kind of moved away from leaving it all over the row, right? Substantial on weed control, that amount of mulch. That's what she looks like when the corn comes up. That's what it should look like. Yeah, you can grow some pretty good corn planted into clover stands. Um, Here's just an example of my nitrogen strip trials. So statistically speaking, once you drop below 100 pounds of applied nitrogen, in this instance, you are not, uh, or above 100 pounds, you're not returning more bushels. So more to be learned on this, and this is good that we're doing more trials. And of course, in the U of M, we'll do a trial. They'll do replicated, and they're going to do it with the plot combine, etc. So the pillars of the Oat Mafia, like the pillars of this project from my perspective, farmers obviously, right? Because we're doing things differently. Um, but one thing that I've really learned is that it's to me it's been easier to get the farmers to be engaged, but we're really tied into our existing system. It is really hard to break into new markets, even the oat market. It is hard to get the attention of big mills. It takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of relationship building because we need good relationships. But the next pillar is those companies and businesses that mill or put consumer packaged goods products on the shelves. Um, it's also the public, the community, the consumers, because they have the purchasing power to influence companies that put products on grocery stores. That they have the purchasing power. We want to give them the power and the choice to be able to buy from mafia members or not, right? So we need to have that choice in the first place. We need to get products on the shelves with us, our oats in them, right? It's also the government entities, and that's local, state, and national, because national is obviously the farm program and crop insurance and RMA. Local and state have a lot of influence in cost share programs that can be very, very beneficial in taking the edge off the risk of starting something new. And then, of course, the nonprofit entities like Practical Farmers of Iowa, Land Stewardship Project, the Nature Conservancy, and all the others, right? But the network, at this point, I wanted this slide. I actually just redid this presentation, but I wanted this slide at this point that would show all the connections or people that I'm connected to, like the network. I don't have enough time to do that, but they all hold up the project and are needed, right? They're all needed. I need the other members to advocate for us. So here's Kevin, my best friend, started the Oat Mafia with me at the Minnesota State Capitol, advocating for the expansion of the Olmsted County Groundwater Protection and Soil Health Program, right? So it helps to hear from the farmers that this is what we need, this is what we want to do. And I was, this is the hill that overlooks my place is far to the north here. It's pretty close to where the original sod house was when my family homesteaded. And when I overlooked this, landscape, and now I see more and more fields of green starting to show up, or more fields of residue, and you see all the residue that's out there. That's something that I've been probably like watching it grow is something that provides a lot of pride to me. Like I met my fiance through this oat project. I've met some very good friends and like it's something for me, it's legacy work. It's something to help my community with, but it's a legacy project that will never grow old for me. I hope it doesn't. So,
All right. Thank you, Martin. It's actually really good. It's great. Thank you. We have we have 13 minutes, so I will zoom up here to the top of the questions. I will get to as many as I can. Let me scroll up here. The first one, do you have any farmers or colleagues, I'm assuming, that swath oats and then pick up with a dummy head days later?
Yep. So there are some members that group members that swath, and it could be because that's what their equipment is. That's what they have, right? Rotary combines are the best for combining straight, but if you still have a walker, it's best for swathing and then picking back up. The advantage of swathing could be that you can dry your weeds out or whatever if you have weeds that snuck through, or if your clover is getting a little too tall, that you're going to start to clip it when you're combining. You could swath it, let it dry out, pick it back up. The disadvantage is that if you lay it down in the swath and it continues to rain, your cover crop or the weeds will grow through the swath. You're not going to be able to get it dried and picked back up. So there's advantages and disadvantages. I could see a point that I would have the ability to swath and combine, the ability to run the stripper head, and the ability to run a draper. I could see that coming for me because the swather and the pickup head or the dummy head, that's not real expensive thing. You know, it's not real expensive to invest in that. But it's good to have different options, but I'm predominantly run I don't take the stripper head off. You know, that's what I run. So
Okay. Um, this is kind of a two-part. How do you cultivate your oats? Like making variety decisions, sowing density, and fertilizer quantity, and which quality characters you may achieve in your average years.
yeah, so I stick with varieties that we have experience with and that are being studied within the university or PFI system. So like I don't always recommend, I never recommend like, well, that's the highest yielding variety. You need to plant that. There's other characteristics that are very important, the most being, in my opinion, standability, so that they don't lodge, and harvestability. Sowing density, we plant to in order to achieve 1.3 million live plants. And the reason that we sow thicker is so that we do not get the oats to tiller. We want them to have one stem, one head, because that leads to, on average, a higher test weight. So we're 1.3 million live plants, figure 10% seeding loss, and then whatever your germ loss is. So that may be 128 pounds or 4 bushel, but I don't want to pin it to that. You're looking at more of the number of plants per acre. Um, so quality characteristics, I guess over the 5 completed years of growing food grade oats and the approximately 175,000 bushels I've grown over the last 5 years, I have averaged 39 pounds. The highest test weight oats I've ever sold was 44. I've never had a rejected load due to test weight. So, but I also watch it like a hawk, and if it needs help, like running through a grain vac, I will. Um, and then moisture, of course, you know, it comes down to grain management to get it to the proper moisture. And then yields, over the 5 years, my APH is 112. Highest yielding oats I've ever grown were in the 140s. The lowest I've had some down in the 80s, 70s before. So.
Okay.
And I guess for the second part of that, the ones that are most important, test weight and moisture, no bugs.
All right. I scroll down here. What happens to the oats that don't make the grade, such as the oats that had the rye in them? And is there a secondary market for those?
Yeah, it's the feed market. So there's a market in Savage. Well, now it's not Savage anymore. They've moved it to the next elevator west, which is right outside of Valley Fair. Um, name's escaping me, but it's right next to Valley Fair. It's the next driveway. So they don't really care if there's rye in the oats because it's predominantly feed. They can take down to 32-pound oats at Malt One, which is downtown Minneapolis. So if you're feeling like you want to drive a semi truck into downtown Minneapolis, you can go to Malt One, but it is an option. Otherwise, easier options are, we have located other feed markets that will buy either the screenings or the contaminated oats and that. So there are other markets, but you will take a hit. You're not going to get top dollar for it. So we can, if you're close with your neighbors in a group, right? So if you're like, we're pretty close in Byron here, like if I have 40-pound oats and Kevin has 34-pound oats, we'll blend them, but that's up to us. So, that's something you need to work on with your neighbors if that's what you choose to do to make sure, well, we weighed this number of bushels, weighed that many, went together. I mean, that's more, but it's something we've done. So,
All right. Sticking with the oats here. How often do you grow oats in your crop rotation? And are there any nematodes or diseases that you've seen, such as crown rust or mildew, that increases over time?
I grow it every third year, so I have a full three crop rotation on 1,400 acres. Um, Nematodes or diseases, crown rust comes and goes depending on the year. Fusarium head blight comes and goes depending on the year. That's why you scout, apply fungicide as needed. Hopefully, varieties keep advancing so we can get more resistant varieties. One thing I have seen that's a watch out, foxtail seems to like that this rotation. If you don't watch it and take it out, watch for it, scout for it, spray it as needed, control it in your corn and soybean years.
All right, thank you. I'm going to combine these three questions that are next.
Yeah.
How are you seeding your red clover? Is it drilled after oat harvest, or are you frost seeding the red clover, or using it as an annual?
I seed it with the drill in the small seed box. So on a landall, the tube doesn't go down into the opener. It's just right behind the opener. So it kind of like fans it out on the ground and then your closing wheel hits most of it. Um, so I'm putting it on with the drill. The first year I did oats, we didn't have small seeded box on that drill. So I used my air seeder and blew it on after I planted the oats and then pulled a drag with the air seeder just to drag it in. And that worked really good also. So you can broadcast it with your fertilizer too. You don't really need to do much incorporation with red clover.
All right. Um, this person is wondering if you or anyone else within the Oat Mafia has ever tried oats in heavy clay soils.
Yeah, so um we have this soil in eastern part of Olmsted County that used to be the forest. So as compared to like your prairie drive soils and we're in a transition area. So we have loss and we have glacial till, right? So we have some wind blowing soil, some glacial till. We have a little bit of everything. And but that old forest soil is, I mean, handle with care times 10. Like if you work it too wet, it turns it into adobe bricks. And last year I did no-till for a farmer, 60 acres, that it was entirely that soil type. It was really bizarre because I'd put that drill and it wouldn't crumble anything. It just like put it in the slot and closed it up. And I think that the same lessons that you learn from corn and soybeans may apply there a little bit. Um, but if you don't, like emergence wise, corn and soybeans will be behind oats in these clay type soils. Oats will do a better job emerging, right? But if you have too wet of a year, they're going to struggle in it. If you have a drier year, they're going to excel in it. So it's not a deal breaker to grow oats in heavier clay soils, right? But I think keep in mind, same lessons you learn on the corn and soybean side of things, apply some of them to the oats. Don't work it too wet, et cetera, right? But in some ways, it may be a little more flexible, especially when it comes to emergence.
All right, we got a few more minutes and it looks like just a couple of questions left. What chemistry do you use for weed control in the oats? Pre-emerge, post, or other?
Yep, so I spray post in my first fungicide pass when the oats are about 12 to 16 inches tall. I stick with MCPA, and about a half pint. That keeps my clover alive, and kills most of the weeds. Doesn't work very good on your winter perennials or winter annuals. Those you need to control in the fall, like your dandelions or um, any of your winter annuals. Need to control those in the fall. You can use Callisto pre-emerge in the spring. 6 ounces is the rate, but watch your previous years. In general, backing up a little bit that I haven't said anything about is watch your previous year's herbicides. So whether it's corn or soybeans previous year, watch what you put down, watch your pre-plant or your pre-plant interval for your next crop because uh, atrazine and pursuit oats can be very sensitive to those herbicides or that chemistry.
All right, and about a minute, just under a minute left, so quick answer. The last question is, what do you foresee as the market future for oats?
So the market out has been growing consistently for oats. People are eating more oats every year than they did before. So what we need to capture is the growth on that. And then also we need to be a viable option for Midwestern oats to go to mills that that because we're close, we have a water quality story attached with us, we're community oriented, so we need to capture that growth, and we need to be the local option. So it is growing. There's a new mill getting built, so it is growing.
All right. Thank you, Martin, for that. Great presentation. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today.